This story is titled, Parents Called Me Selfish, after my sister slapped me on her anniversary because I asked her to return money she borrowed from me for her wedding. Hi everyone, before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and make sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Alright, here's some backstory because I feel like context matters. I'm Melissa, 28 years old, living in Denver with my 4-year-old daughter, Ellie. Life as a single mom is no walk in the park, but I've been holding it down. Ellie is my world, and everything I do is for her. Between juggling my full-time receptionist job at a dental office and freelancing as a graphic designer at night, I barely have time to breathe. But hey, I make it work. I don't have the luxury to complain about being tired when there's a kid depending on me. We live in a modest little 2-bedroom apartment. It's not Pinterest-worthy or anything, but it's home. Most of my furniture is secondhand. Some of it I even got off the curb. Don't judge. A good sanding and some paint can work wonders. My splurges are pretty much limited to Ellie's toys, or taking her out for ice cream once in a while. I'm not saying this to play the world's smallest violin, just painting the picture. I'm a make-do with what you have kind of person because, well, I don't have a choice. Now let me tell you about my sister, Chelsea. She's 31 and living what she thinks is her best life. Chelsea's been the golden child since we were kids. If she wanted something, she got it, no questions asked. Meanwhile, I was the one being told to save my allowance if I wanted something extra. It's not like I'm bitter, okay, maybe a little, but let's be real. Chelsea's always had a way of skating through life without dealing with consequences. Growing up, Chelsea was the one who got everything handed to her. She wanted dance lessons? Sure. Quit after a month? No problem. Needed a new car at 16? Done. She's never really known what it's like to hear no or have to make sacrifices. My parents would bend over backward to make sure Chelsea had everything she wanted, while I got the usual "you're the responsible one" lecture and maybe some socks for Christmas. Again, not bitter, but you get the vibe. Meanwhile, I'm over here busting my butt to make ends meet. My mornings start at 6 a.m., getting Ellie ready for daycare and squeezing in some freelance work before heading to the office. I pick her up after work, make dinner, and spend whatever time I can with her before diving back into my freelance projects once she's asleep. It's exhausting, but seeing Ellie smile makes it worth it. There's this one thing about being a single mom that people don't talk about enough: the constant pressure. I don't have a safety net. Every dollar I spend is calculated. If my car breaks down, it's on me. If Ellie gets sick and I have to miss work, that's my paycheck taking a hit. That emergency fund I worked so hard to build, it's not just a cushion, it's my lifeline. So, yeah, when someone says they'll pay me back or keep their word, I take that seriously. I've never asked for handouts, and I've never wanted to be a burden on anyone. That's why I started freelancing in the first place. The extra income isn't just a nice to have, it's how I make sure Ellie has a future. I dream about things like sending her to a good school, taking her on a real vacation one day, or maybe even saving enough to buy a little house where she can have her own yard. Simple stuff, right? But when you're doing it all on your own, even those small dreams feel so far away. Now here's where things get tricky. My parents, bless their hearts, love Chelsea to pieces. She's their pride and joy, their golden girl. And because of that, they can't, or won't, see her flaws. To them, Chelsea's just trying to make her way in life, while I'm apparently too independent for my own good. I've heard that one more times than I can count. If Chelsea's having a rough patch, they're the first to jump in and fix it. When I was struggling after Ellie was born, though, their advice was more like, "You're strong, Melissa. You'll figure it out." And I did, because I had no choice. But it's hard not to notice the difference in how we're treated. Chelsea gets sympathy and solutions. I get told to tough it out. I've lost count of how many times Chelsea's come to me for help. It's always some urgent situation, like the world will end if she doesn't have whatever shiny thing she's fixated on that week. And because I'm not a total monster, I've helped her out here and there, even when it's meant tightening my own belt. I've lent her smaller amounts of money in the past, and I've paid for things when she forgot her wallet. Each time, she swears she'll pay me back or return the favor. But surprise, she never does. If you're wondering why I keep helping her, trust me, I've asked myself the same thing. Part of it is guilt. Growing up, I was always told to take care of your little sister. Even though she's older than me, the dynamic never really shifted. The other part? I guess I hoped that one day she'd finally grow up and realize the world doesn't revolve around her. Anyway, this is my life. Me, working nonstop to give Ellie a good future, while Chelsea floats through hers like it's one big party. I've stayed quiet about it for the most part, but there's only so much a person can take before something has to give. And trust me, things were about to get a whole lot messier. Chelsea's wedding 2 years ago felt more like a Hollywood production than a family gathering. I'm not exaggerating when I say it could have been pulled straight from the pages of a luxury bridal magazine. The venue was this insane mountaintop resort with sweeping views of the valley, the kind of place that screams money. The flowers? Flown in from some fancy shop out of state. And Chelsea's gown? Custom designed, of course, with layers of silk and lace that looked like they'd cost more than my annual rent. My parents, predictably, footed most of the bill. They'd been saving for Chelsea's wedding since she was a kid, apparently. Meanwhile, I didn't even get help paying for Ellie's daycare. But whatever. It wasn't a competition, right? Or at least that's what I kept telling myself. But even with my parents throwing money at her dream wedding, Chelsea decided it wasn't enough. No, she had to have a specific photographer, someone she found on Instagram who was apparently the best in the business. This photographer charged $7,000. That's right, $7,000 for photos. My parents, shockingly, said no. So, of course, Chelsea came to me. She didn't just ask me for the money. She guilt-tripped me into it. I remember sitting across from her at one of her favorite coffee shops, a place where a single latte cost as much as my weekly grocery budget. She was all dolled up, wearing some designer coat and perfectly manicured nails, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. "Melissa, you have to help me," she whined, her voice dripping with fake desperation. This is my one big day. Everything has to be perfect. I sipped my plain black coffee, trying not to roll my eyes. "Chelsea, $7,000 is a lot of money. I don't know if I can just lend you that much." Her face immediately twisted into the kind of pout she's been perfecting since we were kids. "You're the only one I can count on. Mom and Dad don't get it. They think any photographer will do. But this is my wedding. These are memories I'll have forever." I wanted to say no. I should have said no. But then she hit me with a promise. "I swear I'll pay you back in a month. I promise, Melissa. You know I'd do the same for you if you needed it." That was a lie, and I knew it. Chelsea's track record for keeping promises was about as reliable as a used car with a bad engine. But she was family, and part of me felt like I didn't have a choice. If I said no, I'd be the bad guy. It wasn't like I had a secret stash of cash lying around. That $7,000 came straight out of my emergency fund, the money I'd saved for Ellie and me in case of, well, emergencies. But Chelsea made it sound like this once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I didn't want to be the reason her dream wedding fell apart. So I wired her the money, telling myself it was just a loan, not a gift. The wedding itself was just as over-the-top as you'd imagine. Everything was perfect, or at least it looked perfect. The mountaintop resort was decked out in white roses, the string quartet played softly in the background, and Chelsea looked like a movie star in her custom gown. The famous photographer she just had to have was there, of course, snapping away like the paparazzi. They took photos of everything. Her, Eric, the cake, even the guests, most of whom were probably wondering why the photographer kept telling them to act natural. Meanwhile, I sat at one of the back tables, trying to enjoy my overcooked chicken, and wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. The whole thing felt so excessive. I couldn't help but think about how much that $7,000 could have done for me and Ellie. But I told myself it was fine. Chelsea promised to pay me back in a month, and I had to believe she would. Then came the honeymoon. While I was at home juggling work, daycare pickups, and freelance deadlines, Chelsea and Eric were living it up in Bora Bora. 3 weeks of overwater bungalows, candlelit dinners on the beach, and private snorkeling excursions. The photos she posted were beautiful, sure, but every time I saw one, I felt a knot in my stomach. It's not that I didn't want her to enjoy her honeymoon, it's just, how could she afford a trip like that and still owe me $7,000? I decided to let it slide for a bit. Weddings are expensive, honeymoons even more so, and I figured Chelsea probably needed time to settle back into life. But when 2 months passed and I still hadn't heard a word about the loan, I decided to reach out. I sent her a casual text. "Hey, just checking in about the $7,000. Let me know when you're able to send it over." Her reply came the next day. "Oh, things are tight right now, but I haven't forgotten. Don't worry." That little smiley face at the end almost made me throw my phone. Tight? Really? She just spent 3 weeks in Bora Bora and had the nerve to tell me things were tight? But I didn't say anything. I figured maybe she really did need more time. Over the next few months, Chelsea's Instagram was like a highlight reel of her ridiculously lavish life. First, there was a weekend trip to Napa Valley, complete with cheese boards that probably cost more than my car payment. Then it was a beach vacation in the Bahamas, where she and Eric posed under palm trees and captioned their photos with things like, "Work hard, play harder." Work hard? Chelsea didn't work at all. And it wasn't just the vacations. Every time I visited her house, there was something new. A fancy espresso machine in the kitchen, a brand new sectional sofa in the living room, even custom collars for her dog, Duke. Meanwhile, I was over here counting pennies to make sure Ellie had what she needed. I brought up the loan again during one of our phone calls. Chelsea, I noticed you've been traveling a lot lately. Have you had a chance to think about paying back the $7,000? Her response was so casual, it made my blood boil. Oh, Melissa, I haven't forgotten. Things have just been so busy. I'll get it to you soon. Busy? Too busy to transfer the money you owe me? I didn't say that, but I wanted to. Every time I tried to bring it up, she brushed me off like it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was the principle. I had worked so hard to build that emergency fund for Ellie and me. It was supposed to be our safety net, the thing that kept us afloat if anything went wrong. And here Chelsea was, acting like it didn't even matter. Every time I saw her latest purchase or vacation, it felt like a slap in the face. How could she live like that while ignoring her promise to me? It wasn't fair, and it wasn't right. But what could I do? She was my sister, and I didn't want to ruin our relationship over money. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a huge mistake trusting her. After 6 months of hearing excuses from Chelsea, I called my mom to vent. I thought she'd at least try to talk to Chelsea, maybe push her to keep her promise. Instead, Mom immediately jumped to Chelsea's defense. Melissa, she's under a lot of pressure right now, Mom said, as if I hadn't just spent 5 minutes explaining how Chelsea was spending money on everything but paying me back. Pressure? I asked. What pressure? She's buying furniture, going on vacations, and driving a new car. Meanwhile, I'm working 2 jobs to make ends meet. How is that fair? Mom sighed like I was being unreasonable. She and Eric are trying to build their life. You know how hard it is to start out as a young couple. Mom, I'm raising Ellie on my own, I shot back. I don't even have the option of buying new furniture or going on trips. That $7,000 was my emergency fund. I didn't lend it to her so she could ignore me for months and blow it on luxury. She'll pay you back, Mom said, like that was supposed to fix everything. You just need to give her time. Don't forget, she's your sister. That's the thing about my parents. They've always seen Chelsea and me through completely different lenses. Chelsea is the one they coddle and excuse no matter what she does. Me? I'm the one who's fine. I don't need help because I'm strong, responsible, and capable. It's not like they ever said those words outright, but their actions made it clear. When I got pregnant with Ellie, my parents' first reaction was disappointment. They didn't offer to help with anything. Not daycare, not baby clothes, not even advice. Meanwhile, when Chelsea announced her engagement, it was like they'd won the lottery. They couldn't wait to throw money at her wedding, even though she and Eric were already living together and supposedly stable. I tried talking to my dad about it once, thinking maybe he'd see my side. Dad's always been quieter than Mom, but he's the one I thought might understand the financial side of things. Dad, you know Chelsea owes me $7,000, right? I asked. Yeah, your mom mentioned it, he said, not looking up from his newspaper. And you're okay with her just not paying me back? He finally glanced at me, looking slightly uncomfortable. It's not that I don't think she should pay you back, he said slowly. But she's your sister, Melissa. Family sticks together. You can't put a price on that. Family sticks together, I repeated, trying not to let my frustration show. Does that apply to me too? Or is it just Chelsea who gets that benefit? He didn't answer, just went back to reading his paper. That told me all I needed to know. The worst part wasn't even my parents, though. It was how the rest of the family reacted when they found out I was pressing Chelsea about the money. Somehow, I became the villain in this situation. At one point, my Aunt Rachel called me one. Melissa, I heard you're upset with Chelsea about some money, she asked, her voice dripping with concern. Upset? I said, barely able to keep my cool. She owes me $7,000 and hasn't made a single payment in almost a year. Wouldn't you be upset? Rachel let out a sympathetic little sigh. Oh, honey, I understand. But you have to think about what Chelsea's going through. A new marriage, a new house. It's a lot. She's probably just overwhelmed. Overwhelmed, I said, incredulous. She's not overwhelmed. She's out here living like a Kardashian while I'm working 60-hour weeks to support my daughter. How is that fair? Life isn't always fair, Melissa, Rachel said, like that was supposed to make me feel better. You just have to rise above it. Don't let money come between you and your sister. Every conversation like that made me feel more and more isolated. No one seemed to care about what I was going through. To them, I was just being petty and selfish, while Chelsea was the poor, overwhelmed victim who needed everyone's support. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the one who had gone out of my way to help her in the first place. I'd given her my emergency fund, trusting her to pay it back, and now I was the bad guy for expecting her to keep her word? It was infuriating. Eventually, I stopped bringing it up around my family. It wasn't worth the constant guilt trips and lectures about family loyalty, but that didn't mean I let it go. Every time I saw Chelsea post about a new vacation or a fancy dinner, It felt like another slap in the face. I was done playing the role of the understanding sister. If she thought I'd just roll over and forget about the money, she had another thing coming. Chelsea and Eric's one-year wedding anniversary dinner was set at one of those ridiculously overpriced restaurants downtown. The kind of place where they serve bread in tiny baskets and call it artisan. My parents, of course, thought it was the perfect spot to celebrate their perfect couple. When they called to invite me, it wasn't even a question, it was a command. "Melissa, you have to come," Mom said. "It's important for the family to be together." I didn't want to go, at all. But I also didn't want to hear another lecture about how I was the one tearing the family apart, so I reluctantly agreed. I threw on the nicest dress I owned, which wasn't much compared to Chelsea's closet full of designer outfits, grabbed my coat, and drove downtown, already regretting my decision. The restaurant was exactly what I expected. Dim lighting, candles on every table, and waiters who looked like they moonlighted as fashion models. I walked in and immediately spotted Chelsea, holding court at the center of the table, laughing loudly and soaking up the attention. She looked flawless, of course, in a sleek black dress and a diamond necklace that I'm sure wasn't cheap. "Melissa, you made it," Mom beamed as I sat down. "Isn't this place lovely?" Chelsea picked it out herself. "Yeah, it's nice," I mumbled, taking my seat and eyeing the menu. One glance told me I wouldn't be eating much. Everything cost at least double what I usually spent on groceries. Chelsea, meanwhile, was in her element. She was basking in the praise, telling everyone about how amazing her first year of marriage had been. Eric chimed in occasionally, nodding along like a dutiful husband. But mostly it was Chelsea's show. "We're so lucky," she gushed, raising her glass. "This past year has been incredible. We've traveled, renovated the house, and just really built something special together." I sipped my water and tried not to roll my eyes. Lucky, that's one way to put it. Another way would be to say she was living off money she didn't have, including mine. The night dragged on, and with every toast and every compliment Chelsea received, my frustration grew. I could feel it bubbling up inside me, threatening to spill over. I hadn't planned to bring up the money. Not tonight, not here. But sitting there, listening to her talk about her amazing life, I couldn't stay silent any longer. As dessert was being served, I finally spoke up. "Chelsea," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "We need to talk about something." The table went quiet. Chelsea glanced at me, her smile faltering just slightly. "What is it?" "It's been over a year since your wedding," I said. "When can I expect you to pay me back the $7,000 I lent you?" The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to Chelsea, whose face went from mildly amused to visibly annoyed. "Melissa," she said, her tone sharp, "this is not the time or place to talk about that." "Well, when is the time, Chelsea?" I shot back. "Because every time I bring it up, you brush me off. I'm done waiting." At this point, everyone at the table was staring at us, and Chelsea's face was turning red. Not from embarrassment, but from anger. She stood up abruptly, and before I could react, she slapped me across the face. The shock of it left me frozen. My cheek stung, but what hurt more was the sheer audacity of what she'd just done. "You are so selfish," she hissed, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "How dare you ruin my anniversary dinner over a few dollars?" "A few dollars?" I repeated, standing up to face her. "Chelsea, it's $7,000. That wasn't pocket change for me. And you've spent the past year acting like it doesn't even matter." "Enough!" Mom suddenly snapped, her voice cutting through the tension. She turned to me with a look of pure disappointment. "Melissa, how could you? This was supposed to be a celebration, and you've turned it into a spectacle." "Me?" I said, incredulous. "You're mad at me? Chelsea's the one who slapped me, and she's the one who owes me money." Dad, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. "Melissa, this isn't the time to air grievances. You should have waited." "Waited? For what? Another year?" I asked, my voice rising. "She's had plenty of time to pay me back, but instead, she's been spending money on vacations, furniture, and a new car. Meanwhile, I'm working 2 jobs just to get by. How is that fair?" The argument went in circles after that, with my parents defending Chelsea and Chelsea playing the victim. Eric just sat there, staring at his plate, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. By the end of it, I was so furious that I grabbed my coat and left the restaurant, barely holding back tears as I walked to my car. The slap hurt, sure, but what hurt more was the realization that my family would always side with Chelsea no matter what. In their eyes, she could do no wrong, and I was just being selfish for wanting her to keep her word. I drove home that night with my cheek still stinging, and my heart feeling heavier than ever. But as much as the whole thing hurt, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Chelsea off the hook. Not this time. The aftermath of that dinner was as messy as I expected, maybe even worse. The next morning, my phone started blowing up with calls and texts from my parents. Apparently, Chelsea had gone home crying, playing the victim card to perfection, and now I was the family villain. Mom's first text read, "Melissa, how could you do that to your sister on her anniversary? She's devastated." My dad's follow-up wasn't much better. "You owe your sister an apology. That was completely uncalled for." I ignored them at first, but the anger building up inside me made it impossible to let it go. So, I called Mom back. The second she answered, she launched into her guilt trip. "Do you know how upset Chelsea is? She spent the whole night crying. She said you humiliated her in front of everyone." "Melissa, how could you?" "How could I?" I snapped. "Mom, she slapped me. In front of everyone. And let's not forget the part where she owes me $7,000 and has done nothing but ignore me for a year. She's under so much stress," Mom said, her voice pleading. "She and Eric are trying to save for their future. You don't understand how hard things are for them right now." "Save for their future?" I practically laughed. Mom sighed deeply, the way she always did when she thought I was being difficult. "Melissa, you're stronger than she is. You don't need to hold on to this grudge. Let it go for the sake of the family." "Let it go," I repeated, my voice rising. "This isn't about a grudge, Mom. It's about respect. Chelsea took advantage of me and I'm done letting her walk all over me. If you can't see that, then I don't know what else to say." I hung up before she could respond. A few days later, Chelsea finally texted me. I thought maybe, just maybe, she was ready to apologize or take some responsibility. But no. Instead, I got, "Melissa, I don't know why you're so obsessed with the money. It's not like you're struggling. You have a good job, a nice apartment, and you don't even have to deal with a mortgage. Meanwhile, Eric and I are trying to build our life, and you're making it impossible for us to move forward. If you really cared about family, you'd drop this." I stared at my phone in disbelief. Obsessed? Obsessed? The audacity of her text almost made me laugh. I took a deep breath and typed back, "Chelsea, this isn't about me being obsessed. It's about you being irresponsible. If you don't pay me back by the end of the month, I'm calling a lawyer." She didn't respond, but I knew she'd read it. The fallout didn't stop there. My parents stopped inviting me to family gatherings for a while, which was honestly a relief. I needed a break from their constant guilt trips. Every once in a while, I'd hear through the grapevine, aka my mom, that Chelsea was devastated or heartbroken over what had happened. "Do you know she hasn't been able to sleep because of this?" Mom said during one particularly frustrating phone call. "She hasn't been able to sleep?" I said, barely able to contain my sarcasm. Wow, that must be so hard for her. So hard for... Meanwhile, I've spent the past year wondering how I'm going to rebuild my emergency fund because she refuses to pay me back. "Why do you have to be so cruel?" Mom shot back. "She's your sister, Melissa. Family forgives." "Family also doesn't steal from each other," I said. "So maybe you should remind Chelsea of that, instead of blaming me for standing up for myself." By the end of the month, I hadn't heard a word from Chelsea. True to my word, I started reaching out to lawyers to explore my options. I wasn't bluffing, and I figured the threat alone might finally make her take me seriously. Sure enough, a week later, Chelsea showed up at my apartment. She didn't even bother pretending to be nice. "Here," she said, shoving an envelope into my hands. I opened it and saw a check for the full $7,000. "Happy now," she snapped, crossing her arms. I looked her in the eye and said, "I'll be happy when you stop treating people like they're disposable." She didn't respond, just turned around and stormed off. "I'll leave you here, Reddit. Let's hope the $7,000 check is clear. I'll update you later if anything goes wrong." Update. Hey everyone. It's been a few months since the anniversary dinner disaster, and I thought I'd give you all an update. A lot has happened, and honestly, I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. First off, the $7,000 check cleared, which was a relief, but let's just say it didn't come without more drama. Chelsea's passive-aggressive jabs continued even after she paid me back. She'd post things on Instagram like, "Finally debt-free. Some people just can't be happy for you." Or, "When you're too successful, they call it entitlement." Clearly, those were aimed at me, but I didn't take the bait. I figured if she wanted to make herself look ridiculous, that was on her. A few weeks ago, I got a call from Eric. At first, I thought it was a pocket dial because, let's be real, Eric never calls me. But no, it was very much intentional. He sounded nervous, stumbling over his words, and finally blurted out, "Melissa, I just wanted to apologize for everything that's happened." I was stunned. Eric wasn't exactly known for taking a stand, so this was unexpected. "Apologize for what?" I asked. "For Chelsea," he said. "I didn't know the whole story until recently. She told me she'd already paid you back months ago. I only found out the truth after the anniversary dinner." Apparently, Chelsea had been lying to Eric. She told him she paid me back shortly after the wedding and that I'd just been harassing her for more money out of jealousy. Eric believed her. Why wouldn't he? But after the dinner, he started putting the pieces together. I'm really sorry you had to go through that, he said. If I'd known, I would have stepped in sooner. It was nice to hear, but also infuriating. I told him, look, I appreciate the apology, but this isn't just about the money. It's about her complete lack of respect for me, or anyone really. Eric agreed, and then he dropped the big news. He and Chelsea were having issues, big ones. He didn't go into too much detail, but it was clear that her spending habits and constant lies were taking a toll on their marriage. The drama didn't stop there. Last week, Chelsea tried to throw a fancy housewarming party to show off some new renovations. She invited pretty much everyone in the family, except me, obviously. But word got out that her bank account was practically empty because she maxed out all her credit cards on the renovations. Apparently, the party ended up being a total disaster. The catering service canceled last minute because her payment bounced, and she had to explain to her guests why there was no food. Some of the family finally started seeing through her perfect facade, and let's just say her reputation took a major hit. I wish I could say I felt bad for her, but honestly, she brought it on herself. As for me, life's been looking up. Without the stress of that loan hanging over my head, I've been able to rebuild my emergency fund and focus on Ellie and myself. I even started taking a few weekends off work to spend more time with her, which has been amazing. Chelsea and I haven't spoken since she dropped off the check, and I'm fine with that. Some relationships aren't worth saving, even if they're family. I cut ties completely with my parents as well. Thanks for reading, and for everyone who supported me through this, you're the real MVPs.